Once nanay spermatocyte, it will it will immediately undergo primary meiosis 1, but stops at prophase 1. Okay? Stops siya sa prophase 1, and the process will continue. So the meiosis 1 process will continue during the puberty stage of a female. Okay? So once the meiosis 1 will be completed, so for example, si female kay dalaga, si female kay nagdadalaga na. Okay, so the meiosis 1 process will continue, and your primary oocyte will produce one secondary oocyte and a polar body. Okay. Polar body, might be wondering what are polar bodies. So the role of the polar body, by the way, in oogenesis is just to reduce the number of chromosomes sa male sa female. That is their only role in the oogenesis process, since a requirement for a gamete or an egg cell is of course to have only half the number of chromosomes, which is 23 in humans. Okay, so muna siyang role sa polar body is para mahimong haploid kining secondary oocyte after meiosis 1. Okay? Then the polar bodies will just will be disintegrated inside the body and will be probably eaten by our phagocytotic cells. Then after your secondary spermatocyte, after meiosis 1, so they will nanay secondary spermatocyte, and then it will immediately undergo meiosis 2, but it will stop the process until metaphase 2 stage, and we'll wait if the egg will be fertilized by a sperm cell before it will continue to complete its meiosis 2 process. But if there are no sperm cell that was able to fertilize the egg, the egg cell will go outside the body through the process of menstruation. Okay. So after meiosis 2, so for example, sa metaphase stage na fertilized na si egg, so the process meiosis 2 will continue and will form an ovum. Okay? Ovum and a polar body. Again, the role of the polar body, polar body diri sa after meiosis 2 or wala na siya gamit, no? Its role is just to divide ra ang cell og gamay. Divide siya gamay para minimal ra nga size ang mawagtang sa egg cell. Okay, since ang egg cell kay dako makaayo compared to sperm cell. So muna siya. And then your ovum will undergo maturation, and then it will form into a mature egg, and then and after that the egg will undergo embryogenesis process. Once an egg cell will not be able to proceed, will not be able to complete the oogenesis process if it is not fertilized. Okay, so once the egg is not fertilized, so your oogenesis process will only stop at metaphase stage. But if the metaphase 2 stage, but if the egg cells are fertilized by the sperm cell, so the meiosis 2 process will continue, and again it will form an ovum and then to mature egg, and after that the egg cell will undergo embryogenesis process. Okay, so do you have any questions so far? Any question? Clarification? Wala? Nahilong ba? Okay, if you don't have any questions, so let's proceed to the last part of this module. So this is fertilization and initial embryo development. Okay. Once the egg will be fertilized by the sperm cell, so the embryogenesis process or the development of the embryo will start now. So the egg will form into a zygote. So zygote is already your fertilized egg class. Okay. And then they will undergo series of cell division from 2-cell stage to 4-cell stage. And then the eggs, once the cell will continue to divide, they will form into a cluster of ball made up of clusters of cells that is being compressed together. So that is what we call a morula class. And then the morula will form
So what's the meaning of morula again?
It is a ball. It is like a ball made up of clusters of cells that are being compressed together due to the series of continuous cell division. Okay, during embryonic development. And then, so your morula will develop will form a hollow shape on its inside and will eventually form into a blastocyst. So after blastocyst class, so since our diagram is only up until blastocyst, so after blastocyst, after blastocyst, so the inner cell tube that we have here will form into your germ layers. Okay, so the mesoderm, endoderm, and ectoderm, and that becomes the start. Yeah, that will start now the fetal development, or the development of your the fetus. Okay. So that's basically it. So for embryonic development class, so once the egg will be fertilized by the sperm cell, so it will form a zygote, then will undergo a series of cell division. So we have the 2-cell stage here, 4-cell stage here, then sa kadaghan cell division, nag-form siya ball, may mo siyang morula, and then blastocyst. Okay? Any question? Nag-ilagay akong laptop. Any question? None, sir. None? Okay. Don't have any questions, so let's let's proceed to Mendelian genetics class. Okay. Can you see my screen? Share naman the icon.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Mendelian genetics class, no. So this is actually the start of. We are on the genetics proper topic. Before we are going to start with this topic, by the way, so let me introduce to you a few terms that we're going to use. This was taken from your module number 7, and wala na ako gikuha tanan since I think this is the only the terms that I am going to show here for me is what we're going to is the terms that we are really going to use for the entire duration of this discussion. Okay, so first we have your dominant, the term dominant. Dominant, so it is an allele of a gene that is always expressed when present and always represented by a capital letter. So here is an example of a genetic composition of a certain organism. So if when we say dominant class, so it is again always represented using a capital letter. So you see this one, this one, this one. So these are dominant alleles, and this one. Okay. These are dominant alleles. Once these alleles appear in a genetic composition of an organism, so the organism will manifest the dominant trait. Okay. Sa dominant gani, nagani kayo makita na dominant trait. For example, na dominant allele. So it is already understood that the organism will really manifest the dominant trait. So this is an example of a genetic composition of an organism. So and capital letter A represents the dominant allele, and your small letter a represents the recessive allele. Okay, next we have your recessive. So recessive are alleles whose expression is always covered by other alleles except when they are in a homozygous state. So recessive alleles are always expressed in lower cases. Okay. Recessive alleles, based on the definition, are always masked by the dominant allele. So for example, if you are going to partner recessive allele with a dominant allele, so the recessive allele will not appear on the trait of that specific organism, but the dominant allele. Mo-appear siya if inani ang mugawas nga genetic composition. Okay. Next, we have your heterozygous. Heterozygous meaning an individual with different alleles for one gene. Okay. Different alleles for one gene. So like an example of a heterozygous, we have this one. Okay. This is considered a heterozygous because there is one dominant allele here and one recessive allele. But if both are dominant alleles, so both alleles are dominant and both alleles are recessive, so we call them as homozygous or homozygote. So they have individual with identical alleles for one gene. Example of a homozygote is this one, or a homozygous recessive is this one, and also this one. Okay. Kung capital letter, we call them homozygous. If capital letter, small letter, they are heterozygous. If small letter, that's homozygous in genetics. Okay. Then we have the phenotype. Phenotype are your observable traits, meaning we can see those traits. We were able to observe those traits using our five senses. Okay, an example of a phenotype is black hair. Okay, black hair, blonde hair, tall, short. So those are an example of a phenotype class. Okay. Next, we have your genotype. So it is an allele combination for a given gene or a genetic makeup of a certain phenotype. So for example, a person is having a manifesting a black hair, so it's black hair is a dominant trait, so its genotype could be this one or this one. Okay, so that again, genotype is a genetic composition of a certain phenotype. So kung tall ka, yung genotype, so kung tall ka, base mo yung genotype, working ka. Okay. And lastly, we have the allele. So it is a variant form of gene. So allele. So alleles are always represented using letters of the alphabet now. So this one, each of this one, so this and this, and these are called alleles. Okay. In genetics, so they are just a variant form of a given gene. Okay. And the next, so we have, by the way, classmates, let me introduce to you a person named Mr. Gregor Johann Mendel. So he is the founder of genetics. So we are already at the first part of the topic now. Remember his name, class. So he is the father of genetics. So he is a priest who performed research in plant breeding. And yeah, he is the person who developed the three laws of inheritance. But class, since I think Mendel was alive at around 16th to 17th century, and his work was not yet recognized until 20th century. So, and this person experimented on pea plants, by the way, and was able to, he was able to observe the traits that are found in pea plants. So in pea plants, so these are the example of traits that are dominant. So we have the round, yellow-colored seed, the inflated pod form, green-colored pod, the flower position, the seed coat color, and the length of the stem. So he was able to observe these traits, and these are the recessive traits that he observed on his experiments. So the wrinkled seed form, the green-colored seed, restricted pod form, yellow-colored pod, terminal flowers are located at the terminal part or at the top of the stem, and the color of the seed coat is white and the stem is short. Now, let's proceed to Mendel's three laws of inheritance. Okay. First law is the law of dominance. So first law is the law of dominance. So dominant alleles will always be expressed. Meaning, if you can see a dominant allele, by the way, class, so as per law of dominance, that allele will always be expressed. Like for example here, asa pa kani? Dominant allele ni siya, di ba, kaning capital letter. So if you see a dominant allele, so that the trait of that dominant allele will always be manifested by the organism, or will always be expressed regardless of its pair. For example, nashay pair nga recessive allele. So this recessive allele will always be masked by the dominant trait, and the dominant trait will always be expressed. That's as per the law of dominance here. Here. If alleles are recessive, its expression will be hidden, okay, by the presence of the dominant allele. So example, so the allele for black hair, letter B, so that's dominant, and small letter B for blonde hair, that's recessive. Okay, then if mono genetic composition, so that's black hair, so the organism will manifest black hair, or the person will manifest black hair. If this will be the genetic composition of the organism, still an organism will manifest black hair. But if both gani in a recessive, that's a time blonde hair. The organism will manifest blonde hair. Okay. So for the law of segregation, class, so Law of segregation is the second law of inheritance. So this law explains that a pairs of alleles segregates from each other during meiosis or cell division, or gamete formation, and only one allele will be present on each gamete. So here, we also use law of segregation when we try to solve Punnett square now, since we are trying to separate each and every alleles that we have here that we are trying to cross for. So if this will be the genetic composition of an organism, and then if we are going to apply law of segregation, so just very basic, separate siya into this one and this one, and same goes with this one. So if we're going to use the law of segregation, we'll separate siya into inani sa we'll separate siya into inana. And then last, we have the law of independent assortment. So it states that the alleles of two or more different genes get sorted into gametes independently. So after ganun sa law of segregation class, since naman tayo ginatawag na crossing over or inana. So your gametes will sort themselves independently of one another. So in other words, the allele Okay, in other words, the allele a gamete receives for one gene that does not influence the allele that is received by the another gene. Okay. Okay, so do you have any questions so far?
Sir.
Wala na? Okay, so if you don't have any questions, so I have an activity for you. Hold on.